San Diego, the undisputed craft beer capital of America. A culture inspired by the city's laid-back vibes and adventurous spirit. Join journalist and beer enthusiast Vince Meehan as we tour the most innovative local breweries, hear from their founders, and of course, taste some brews. These are the people who made San Diego a beer mecca. This is SD Craft Masters.
In the night, in the open, we go drive, chasing the pavement up ahead. All the lights set in motion, all the worn out scenes and plastic dreams like movies in our heads.
Hey beer lovers, it's another exciting episode of SD Craft Masters. I'm Vince Meehan. We are here at Black Plague today. Founder, Jordan Hoffet. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. We're here in Oceanside, and for everybody that doesn't know, Oceanside is just becoming the it place lately. Is that not right? I mean, you've got restaurants, you've got breweries, you've got all sorts of stuff going on all over the place. It's just kind of like ground zero now.
Yeah, it's definitely come a long way in the last decade, I'd say. They actually deemed the 78 freeway the Hops Highway. So
did they?
Yeah,
Hops Highway.
Alongside with Vista, there's definitely like a huge growth and uptick in local breweries. So yeah, we were kind of a part of that wave, I guess you could say, and it just keeps going. So
I've been dying to come here. I
like what you did there.
The reason is because I love this place. I mean, you've got a really cool theme going on here. With Black Plague, we've got skeletons, we've got coffins, we've got all sorts of imagery.
Right.
Where did that come from?
Well, we honestly fell in love with the era of the Dark Ages. So we were actually going to launch the brand as Dark Ages Brewery. And then it wasn't until we came up with some trademarking issues due to the trademark on beer for dark aged beer already existed. Mm-hmm. But we at that point had already trademarked the Plague Doctor logo. Yeah. We love the Plague Doctor's image. We like how polarizing it is. We like that historically it was a very misunderstood figure. People associate the Plague Doctor with death. Death's coming. He's very scary. But when you really break down the story of the Plague Doctor, it's kind of courageous and misunderstood. And the doctors would get contracted by the city to treat the sick regardless of their financial status. And they would go into these plague-ridden territories and basically stare death in the face and treat these patients, and then have to go get quarantined for 40 days after they did it. And they would, during that time period, they would give them forms of ales to balance their humors at the time. That was part of the medical theory. So you had 4 humors, which was urine, spit, blood, and can't think of the last one
feces.
Right now. So, and how they balance this, but it would basically balance your temperament. So they would use vials, ales to help treat the sick. And the other big thing is that the water wasn't safe to drink. So part of that culture as well is that, brew pubs, lack of a better term, people would come together as a community to mourn their lost ones, drink ale. And it was a belief that these ales would help protect them from contracting the plague and spreading it. So we loved the story behind it. We loved the mysterious, polarizing imagery. And then once we were told that we cannot no longer be Dark Ages Brewery, we were like, well, what other names can we come up with that were relevant to that time period? And Black Plague kind of just became a finalist on the list. And we were kind of feeling one way or the other, like, how can you call a brewery Black Plague? Like, who's going to drink that?
Right.
But then we're thinking, the more people we asked in our circle, some people were like, oh, that's amazing, that's awesome, like, that's so badass. And then other people would be like, you're crazy, like, you cannot call it that.
Right.
But both, you remembered it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like any publicity is good publicity. It's like bad, good. It was so polarizing that you would remember, and the people that loved it really loved it, and the people that didn't like it were still curious to try it. So you kind of started winning people over that way. And once, you know, people realized that you're not going to get the Black Plague from drinking the beer, it started growing and growing and growing. And now it's a very definitive brand with a really definitive culture. And it's the artwork's sick. My partner does a really great job on the artwork.
Shout out his name. We got
Jared Doss, CEO, co-founder of Black Plague Brewing.
so he's the CEO and the artist.
And the artist, yeah.
What?
Yeah, kind of wonder what I do here, honestly. And then I'm the president, and you know, we had a business plan. We packaged it all up and shot it out to my network for the most part, just from all skateboarding history, being a professional skateboarder for almost 20 years. So my demographic and all my relationships. And once we couldn't do Dark Ages anymore, we had to like repitch it as Black Plague, and there was definitely some shakeout. There were some people who were like, "Ooh, that's a little gnarly, we're out." But then the people that stayed were like, "This is even better than what it was before." And yeah, here we are. And so we kind of like to play on the death theme just because it's inevitable and people don't like to talk about it, but it's like the definitive, you know, result.
It also makes great shirts. It makes great swag. And the thing about Black Plague is you've got all sorts of shirts. You're selling skateboards, glasses, all sorts of the artwork on all the cans. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's stuff that you want. It's stuff, if you're a guy, you want that black t-shirt with that imagery on there, and it's just everywhere.
And that's kind of what we wanted to do as well. We didn't want to just pigeonhole ourselves like as a beer brand that made, you know, casual merch to rep. We wanted almost to have the imagery so powerful and unique that it could be a standalone brand regardless of the beer. It was just Black Plague, you know what I mean? So I think we've been able to achieve that, and it just keeps getting better and better and better and better. So you can see, yeah, we've got a pretty diverse lineup of soft goods, and it's all a reflection of all the independent design and branding we do for each of the beers.
Well, you know, a lot of like, you know, you're a skateboarder, a lot of the surfing and skateboarding, they kind of made their own fashion line.
Yeah.
I can see Black Plague, you know, maybe a couple of years, you know, hey, let me get a Black Plague shirt.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Definitely. And you know, you did touch on the fact that you got a skateboard background, as do other people in the brewery. So touch on that a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So I originally grew up in Vancouver, Canada, and I started skateboarding when I was 6 years old. And I just fell in love with it. It wasn't something I even thought of as like a career or whatever. It was just naturally jumped on a board and was like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
So I got lucky because that was something I loved to do right out of the chute. I found that really early in life, and I just went for it. It was just, I didn't question anything after that. It was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. So I just basically took that as far as I could take it. You know, went to international contests when I was a young teenager, got sponsored by Southern California companies. They started inviting me down here to start filming video parts, and I got on some real teams. And then finally, after high school, moved my life down here, and yeah, fulfilled my dream of becoming a professional skateboarder. And during that time, you know, I got to build my relationships with other professional skateboarders like Tony Hawk and Nigel Houston and a handful of other professional skateboarders that are a part of the brewery. And it was fantastic. I loved it, and the culture was amazing. And as I got older, as a pastime hobby, I started brewing in my garage. Just like I got the Northern Brewer startup homebrew kit.
You did it on your own? You didn't take any classes or
Well,
anything?
my wife got me one for my birthday one year, so I just made a little setup in the garage, and then it kind of started getting bigger and bigger, and I was like, oh no, I have a problem. And I met Jared. He was doing some design work for myself. He was helping me build my website for you know, my self-brand in the skateboard industry. So he became a really good friend of mine over those years, and he was you know, a junior manager over at Sony Entertainment, living the corporate life, which he's really good at and has brought a ton of skills from that aspect of his life and incorporated them into the brewery, that some of the structure that otherwise would probably be not here. But where his real passion lied was design and art.
Doing a great job.
And so he saw his future with the corporate America kind of deal. And that's all well and good, but it wasn't scratching his entrepreneurial spirit. It wasn't scratching his need to create and design. So, I was getting in the later years of my career with skating. I just had my second son as well. So I was like 29, 30. My knees started to kind of not be able to do what I needed them to do consistently. And it just hurt. And the next generation of skateboarder was coming in really fast. They were really good. YouTube's crazy. They just, and that's normal to them. So it's the natural progression of the sport. And I was like, man, I really need to figure out what my next chapter is in my life and what's best for my family. And I was like, well, what else do I love to do? Like, I already have done something for almost 20 years of my life, of which a big chunk professionally. Like, that's amazing. I almost felt like I was getting greedy, like, oh, woe's me for getting to live two passions as a career in my life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, here we are. We put this business plan together about 6.5 years ago. We just had our 5-year anniversary.
5 years.
And like I said, it all started, Jared and I were just having a bottle share, one of our batches on a Sunday. And I was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And he was like, man, that sounds awesome. I could use a change in my life as well. So like I said, we came together, built a business plan, and it was off to the races. So
recently we talked to the guys at South O Brewery. They did the same thing. They were two guys in their garage going like, what do we do next? And suddenly, well, why don't we just, we're making beer here and people like it. Let's take it big.
Yeah.
Tony Hawk, he's got his own beer.
Right here.
Oh,
This
over
one.
here.
Yep.
That's it. That's the acid drop.
Yeah.
And so he's definitely a part of the brewery.
Yep. Yeah. So he's a minority investor as well, partner, I should say. So we teamed up with him and his board brand, Birdhouse Skateboards, to do a collaboration, West Coast IPA called Tony Hop's Birdhouse IPA.
That's the one I get when I come here.
Yeah, and so that's really taken off. And he actually came and met up with myself and our head brewer, and we kind of had a different array, a spectrum of hops and combinations that we thought would work really well. And so we had him come in and smell them and pick with us what the hop combination and hop profile that we wanted to do with him. And then he actually jumped on the brew deck and brewed the first batch with our head brewer.
So he was hands-on. He's not
Very
just going to say, yeah.
I think that's what everyone loves about Tony is he just doesn't put his name on anything that he's not 100% in on. And he kind of shows that with Black Plague. He wanted to jump in and get dirty and learn about the
It's
brewing
amazing
process.
how all you skaters are really, moving forward with the brewing, because this is the one I always get, because it tastes good.
Yeah.
And so if Tony was in there mixing the hops and getting the right recipe, he did a great job.
Yeah.
What can I say?
Hey, he's a natural,
What I like about this, obviously the ambiance and all the good art and everything, but also when you come here on a Saturday or Sunday, place is packed.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, you were referring to earlier about back in old England, the pub was the public house where people met. It's kind of doing that now where people can say, this is a destination. It's not like you go, well, we're going to get something to eat, and then we're going to go get a beer, and then we're going to go see some music. Everything's here. You got food, you've got live bands on the weekends, you've got the beer. This is kind of like people hang out here for like a few hours.
Well, to your point, it is kind of a destination because there's only so many zoned industrial areas that you can put a full-scale production facility. So we definitely had to have that full picture and give the customer an experience to want to make the extra effort to come out here and stay put. Because once you're out here, kind of out here, you know what I mean? So it was very important that we had a food aspect. Obviously, when you're drinking, you need something to pair with to keep your bellies full. We had to think, well, it's probably going to be some families or parents with young kids that they need stuff to do as well. So we had the games, and then sometimes we bring out, we had cornhole and a bunch of other, oversized patio, lawn, leisure sports, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And then we got the patio going out front. And then we obviously do big events, whether that's UFC fights or boxing.
On the big screen.
On the big screen, or some sort of video premiere, skate video premieres, documentary premieres. I mean, we've done all sorts of stuff, art shows, fundraisers, and then obviously we have the stage for the live entertainment. We do trivia nights every week as well. And then, like you said, Friday, Saturday night, we have live bands play.
I've seen that you've done numerous collaborations. I think it was Mission Beer. Did you do a collaboration with?
It wasn't Mission. We've done one with this year we did Embolden. We did Fall Brewing.
I remember Fall.
We did June Lake Brewing for our 5-year anniversary. We just brewed one with Mason Ale Works. And then we've done a handful of other ones. One with Virgin Beer last year for our 4-year anniversary. I'm trying to think. We just did one with Abnormal. And the list
And when you do a
goes on.
collaboration, what happens? You get, everybody gets together and decides kind of just, let's make something different. So you shoot ideas across and come up with a kind of a recipe on the spot.
For the most part, I wouldn't say on the spot. I think most of the collaboration work is done in prep via, these days, email threads. So you'll get the head brewers and the owners and everyone on the same page as far as like what kind of style do we want to make, what's the hop profile we want to create, and then once you kind of got a base style with the hops, it's kind of on to the head brewers to kind of go back and forth with like the overall grain bill. Like, well, here's what I'm thinking of adding at Whirlpool, or we're gonna have a huge, massive dry hop, and is it gonna be a 2-stage, kind of things like that. And then on collaboration day, it's more or less a big powwow in the sense of checking in on each other, like, how are operations doing? How are you experiencing these things that we're experiencing? Like, oh, who do you get your cans from? Oh, who does your label art? This kind of thing. Oh, we should compare notes.
Okay.
So it's actually more of like a information sharing, which is super helpful because at the end of the day, we're all in this together and we're all kind of fighting the same issues, whether it's increasing COGS, increasing packaging, hop contracts, malt contracts, supply chain issues, distribution, distributors in different territories, shipping logistics, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's endless. You know what I mean? So it's a really awesome day to kind of have a soundboard on both sides and really understand, like, oh, you're not alone. Oh, you're experiencing that too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, cool.
You
Okay,
don't
well,
feel like such a,
alienated, because you really do get so busy, and the common misconception is like, oh, you own a brewery. Oh, that's so awesome. You get to just chug beers all afternoon with your buds, and this is great. And I was like, oh yeah, the beer makes itself. It's like not the case at all.
No.
And there's so many facets and from ordering and negotiating hop contracts and that sort of thing, to shipping in, to actually preparing the schedule weeks out, and then brewing, obviously, and then packaging, canning, scheduling, and then that's just on the production side. And then the distribution sales side, working with 7, 8, 9, 10, a dozen distributors in the United States, but then also dealing with export and international sales as well, and all the logistics of that. And then you have a bar and a tap room and events and a food truck and yada, yada, yada. And then the special events are also a big aspect as well. So you have and then online sales, merchandise design.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just, the list goes on, and I don't think people really like consider that, and why would you unless you're in it? But going back to the collaboration, it's also nice, you can also touch on all those things. And like I said, it's more of a check-in and a soundboard. And then, you have the big iconic, the bittering edition, slow-mo of the hops going in the boil kettle, and then you get the big collaboration photo. And that's a lot of the times is where you dial in the little details about the beer, whether that's the name or how the artwork's gonna reflect, and how does it incorporate both brands. So on the day, you kind of fine-tune it, and then and then once you brew it, kind of off to the races, and you send over the final mocks.
And then everybody's excited to say, hey, I love fall, I love Black Plague. Here's a beer they did together, making new shirts for it, the whole thing, and have a whole special deal about that.
And it's also nice, like, because there's always constantly new styles coming out, like specifically bringing up fall brewing. It's like we had never brewed a cold IPA before. In fact, I never even had a cold IPA before, so I was very interested to see the process and what we could come up with together in that, and just for fall to knock it out of the park, really, and it was like super exciting. So now, I never thought I'd be a big fan of cold IPAs, and I didn't know cold IPAs were a thing until earlier this year. So
I haven't had one either. I never had a black IPA until like 6 months ago. So there's still stuff to try. You don't know everything.
Well, I was kind of confused because I was like, well, aren't all IPAs cold? Like, isn't that?
Well, see, I don't know.
Don't we drink them cold?
Does that mean they brewed it cold like a lager?
Yeah. So you take lager yeast and you ferment it at ale temperatures.
Okay.
So that's more or less, So it's very similar to like an IPL, but in kind of a reverse fashion.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to be talking to one of your brewers here and taste some of these tasty beers. But here at SD Craft Masters, every now and then, we get some breaking news. And we had some breaking news this morning, just fresh off. Go ahead and...
Well, apparently Stone Brewing, which was the staple of San Diego beer, just sold to Sapporo Holdings. Just found out this morning.
And Sapporo, I mean, they're a really good beer, but you don't think of them as craft, and you don't think of them as, for me, I mean, who knows what happened, but what are they going to do with Stone?
I guess we'll see. I think everyone's kind of in shock, to be honest.
And that's something in the beer world, and Stone has been around for like 40 years or something. They basically were kind of the OGs. They started the whole thing, really.
Definitely.
So to see them get sold, I mean, what happens when, I remember I was talking to the guy from St. Archer, and they had got bought in, and he said, oh, don't worry about it. They're letting us do everything. Everything's fine. They're not going to interfere. Boom, they're gone.
Right.
And everybody said, oh, we're not going to buy St. Archer anymore because they're not local, they're not craft, and they're going to go anyways, and that's what happened.
Yep.
So now, I talked to Jeff at Ballast Point. Oh yeah, we got bought by Kings and Convicts.
Yes.
And he's saying the same thing. Oh, don't worry about it. They let us do our own thing. We keep the recipes. We keep our production. So that's kind of like, I said, okay, well, we'll see what happens there. That was Stone.
Yeah.
I got to think, if you are working at Stone, you're nervous because they're really big.
Huge.
And for them to get bought, they're going to have to discard some stuff. I mean, that's just kind of like the way it goes.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm not educated enough on the matter to go into details, but I mean, it's definitely a huge shock, and I guess we'll see.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be, you heard the breaking news here on SD Craft Masters. And what I can tell everybody here is just watch and see what happens. Here it is. It's June 2022.
Yep.
Let's come back a year from now, 2023, see what happened, because that's something that's definitely, if you see a pattern happening, where you get bought out by a big company, all of a sudden everything just goes away.
Yeah.
The end is near.
Oh yeah. Collaboration with Resident. Yeah. That was a great beer.
So, we don't want you selling to anybody. We like you here in Oceanside. So I don't want to hear anything about, selling to whatever.
Hey, we're here to stay. We're North County. I'd say born and raised, but Canadian. But we've been North County our entire adult lives.
You earned your props here, so definitely.
I like to think we're all in and we work really hard day in, day out. So.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being here at SD Craft Masters. We're going to try some of these delicious beers, including the Tony hops.
Perfect.
So we'll be right back. Hey, beer lovers, we're back at Black Plague in Oceanside. I got the head brewer, I got the CEO. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Aeryk Heeg. I'm the head brewer here at Black Plague. Been here about 5 years.
Yeah, Jared Doss, CEO.
Brand new father.
Brand new father.
Brand
yeah.
new father, congratulations.
5 weeks old today, actually.
5 weeks old, woo! Now, what I found surprising and very impressive is he does the artwork on all the beer as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That's definitely a passion of mine, and was the original role I was supposed to play, a much smaller role, just designing all the merchandise and branding and everything and the website and stuff. But since then, my scope of my role has expanded, and I do all the merchandise, all the branding, all the marketing, all that kind of stuff.
And Jared told me, oh yeah, he used to be like this corporate guy at Sony or something. So I was expecting, corporate guy. Look at this. You belong in the beer world.
If you were here another year ago, my hair was down to here.
No way.
And my beard was much longer.
Yeah. Well, with the artwork, it's just everywhere. It's just off the hook. I mean, it's just so good. What kind of program do you use to create this art? Doesn't look like Illustrator.
A lot of it, I draw it by hand, and then
No
I'll
way.
Photoshop and Illustrator and stuff to clean it up.
So that's the secret then, because I did. It's very, it doesn't look computerized. It's very organic, but definitely, color separated and all that. And yeah.
Yeah, gotta make sure that the label looks good so that it can represent the quality of product that's going in it that this guy's making back there.
Thank you.
Oh, how about that? Now, this is the fun part of our show, of course, because we get to taste some of the beers. First beer on the list, what do we have here?
I think it's the Oracle of Time, correct? Which is our new Czech Pilsner, which is a pretty traditional representation of the style, I would say. But, basically you're going to be looking at something that's obviously crystal clear, as any lager should be. And that's due to the 6 to 7 week lagering period that I use here. So it's not something we ever really skimp out on. So some breweries will, make the decision to shorten their lager periods. That's not something I'm ever willing to sacrifice, just purely based on quality.
And just as a review, a lager is something you ferment the beer in the cool.
Yes, so yeah, like an ale, for instance, like an IPA is going to be fermented somewhere in like the 60-degree range, not 60, in the 60s somewhere, and then a lager is going to be somewhere in the 50s. So generally we keep it really low and slow, so it starts at 49 and we ramp up to about 52.
All right, so let's taste and see what's going on here.
Everybody says they can taste the difference.
Taste the difference of what?
The true lagering process.
I'll let you know. Hold on a second, because I've been to Bavaria. So.
Oh God, I hope.
Let us know.
We're gonna find out right now. Yeah, love this beer right now.
Ooh, yeah.
Very smooth.
It's almost sweet.
Yeah.
No?
So being that it's a Czech lager, obviously the malt will play a little bit more of a role than the hops, but there's still a good chunk of hops in there. We're looking at something that's still reasonably bitter, but obviously going to be more geared towards the malt and a little bit sweeter, a little bit smoother.
Beautiful. Almost reminds me like a Peroni, but better.
Better. There we go. I'll take that.
Better than Peroni.
Better than Peroni.
And it's sacrilege for me to say that because I love Peroni. But great job. Very, European tasting. Is it harder to make a lager, or is it?
Oh yeah. Lagers are generally a lot more difficult to make just because there's not a lot of ingredients to hide behind. So, for instance, in like an IPA or a pale ale or anything else, you're gonna have a lot of hops to hide behind or different caramel malts to hide behind. With a lager, it's very straightforward, very clean ingredients, and there's not very many hops, and there's not very expressive hops. So you're looking at something that's a little bit more subdued.
It's amazing because the brewer at Fall, and you guys collaborate with him. He told me the same thing as with a Pilsner, there's nothing to hide behind.
Right.
Nothing to hide behind.
Right, and those are our good buds over there, so cheers to Fall.
And so, what kind of malt is in there?
We're looking at a floor malted Bavarian Pilsner malt, which we get from Weyermann, which is, again, a traditional maltster, been around for hundreds of years at this point, so classic.
And something that's, I don't hear a lot about it, but with beer, the effervescence, it gets you at the end. It's kind of like a refreshing little zzz.
Yeah, you get that lift, right? And that lift, it's coming from the carbonation. We carb our Pilsners pretty high up in about the 2.7 range. So there's always going to be that brightness and that lift going across your palate.
Gotcha. All right, so while Jordan is getting us our beers, we seem to have had some breaking news this morning. Breaking news in the beer world. Did you hear about Stone?
I did hear about Stone. So shocked to hear that.
So we're trying to digest. I mean, it just happened. We're getting breaking results right now. What's going on there. But I mean, what do you think about that? That's very shocking because they're just huge, and you can imagine that it just seems. I'm in the media, so the same thing happens. Somebody buys your company, a lot of people go out, and there's so many people that work at Stone. They all got to be worried right now.
I think, as far as I know from the press releases and what I've read so far, everyone's supposed to be, maintaining their positions and maintaining operations. They always say that.
They always say that.
And definitely shocked that it was Stone that announced that, just because they have, pounded their fists on the table for 26 years now, saying they will never sell. They will never sell out. Yeah. So to read that this morning was kind of shocked and really interested to see how it's going to play out and affect the industry at large. But I'm hoping that everybody, keeps their jobs and keeps their roles and nothing really changes. But they've already announced they're going to start brewing Sapporo write Sapporo beers at their headquartered location.
I haven't had
Like-
time to digest any of the
They're like,
articles yet.
we're changing the brewing lineup right away, and everyone's starting to brew Sapporo there now.
That doesn't bode well if you ask me, but what do I know? You know, but
I'm
what
shocked.
we're going to do here is because, you know, at SD Craft Masters, we really like to educate people about the beer world. And this right here is just kind of like it's a great unknown, because normally when somebody buys your company, it disappears. And I never understood why you would do that. Why would you spend $2 billion to buy a beer company and then a year later it's gone? Where did that money go? Yeah, and it always happens that way. So we'll just wait until next year. We'll come back here in a year, and we'll see what happened with Stone. You know, where did they go? If they're still alive and functioning and they're viable, well, okay, you know. But if they go down and they're just basically liquidated, you know that that's kind of like the framework of what happens when somebody big buys your beer. Because I mean, why would they sell in the first place to begin with? I guess is.
You know, I've been curious about that too. I think there was a similar acquisition with New Belgium a few years ago, and I think it's giving those larger conglomerate type macro beer companies access to the craft beer consumer market.
Right.
And one, it's either, to your point, they're going to consolidate and liquidate those brands so that they can capture that market share, or it's going to allow them to have more deeper insight into the mind share of what's going on in the craft beer world, and potentially influence what they're doing with their core brand, you know, say Sapporo, for example. But that's such an institutional brand at this point that I don't know that that's going to change. I'm really curious how it's going to play
With
out.
Sapporo, I mean, we were just talking about Heineken. Heineken's been around for 100 years, and they make one beer. You know, look at this. You know, you've been around for 5 years. They got all these things here, but Sapporo's the same way. They've got Sapporo.
Yeah.
And I honestly, you know, it's not easy to find at the store, so I don't know. But you know, these are all kind of guess things that we'll have to see how it plays out. Definitely big news today.
Yeah.
But back to the beer. What do we got now, Aeryk?
We are moving on to our 5-year anniversary ale. It's a collaboration with our buds up at June Lake Brewing up north, just north of Mammoth. But what we made was a kind of like a modern interpretation of a pale ale. So it's hoppy, it's juicy, it's vibrant, but it's not bitter. So I know a lot of people get scared away when they hear the word hoppy, right? But this beer is not very bitter at all. If any, you know, I think on our board and estimations, it says it's somewhere in the range of like 30 IBUs, but it doesn't drink like that. It drinks like maybe 10 to 15. It's very smooth. Like I said, very vibrant, full of flavor, full of aroma. We use some pretty modern hopping techniques. So went back to my roots with some of the ingredients we used, meaning that like I used some traditional hops that have been around, been in the industry for, you know, decades at this point, but tried to use them in a modern way. So Idaho 7 being one of the main highlight hops here, I think is being expressed in a way that you don't find very often, and just due to the way we used it.
All right. Prost, people.
Cheers.
Now it's got that hoppy smell, that's for sure. I always tell people that hoppy smell, whichever hop, what kind of hop is in here?
We got Idaho 7, Amarillo, Mosaic, and Kraus & Co.
The Amarillo's got that really spicy, almost sagey, that reminds me of the canyon, you know,
Right.
out here in Mira Mesa, Claremont, whatever.
Yeah, we use the Amarillo and the dry hop. It's kind of the main dry hop that's in there. Makes up for, I'd say, probably over 50% of our dry hop in this beer. But, you know, it doesn't taste like an Amarillo beer, in my opinion. I think the Idaho 7 is really what is pushing the flavor in this beer.
I have to say that I think that that's one of the things that I'm really proud about our beers and what Aeryk has done with all these different styles is that there are some that are very traditional and classic, like the Oracle of Time is a very, very classic Czech Pilsner, but a lot of these are so approachable. Like you hear IPA, double IPA, pale ale, stuff like that, and people think, oh, that's going to be really bitter and like strip the enamel off your teeth. But no, they're all super juicy and super approachable. And I think that's one of the things that kind of sets our brand apart with all the other brands is just how approachable it is for a new craft drinker to get into it.
Yeah, and this is a good introduction to hops because, you know, I can smell the hops, I can taste them. It's not blasting you in the face.
Right.
And it's got that kind of just ale. It's I could see this, you know, during the afternoon on a picnic out in the sun. It's not heavy, it's not too much, you know. It's,
yeah. It's a good daytime beer. Really happy with it. I think most of us here at the company are pretty proud of this beer. It turned out spectacular.
And that's something that I've noticed, while doing these interviews is the brewers, basically across the board, not only they're doing different flavor profiles, but they're doing kind of profiles of what's the occasion. Is it 1 o'clock in the afternoon at the picnic?
Yeah.
Or is it 5 o'clock in front of the fire pit? There's different, and this is definitely, the picnic, the afternoon.
Right.
It's gonna be lighter, you're not gonna get blasted, and then when you get home and start cooking or whatever, you can knock it up a couple of notches and probably have a more malty beer at that time, right?
Right.
I think, isn't that kind of the ethos of craft beer in general? Is like it's all about the experience.
Yeah.
And so making a beer that's going to serve that specific experience is something that I think Aeryk's really gotten really good at. And just finding a way to differentiate yourself when there's a million pale ales out there. One that can be exciting and new, I think, is something that's really hard to do.
Definitely. And I mean, in general, I would say, because you pointed out for occasions, I would say, in general, I don't really make brews outside of an occasion that takes place during the day or in the sun. Being like that we're in San Diego, there's really no other occasion to kind of make a beer for. So we don't have too many like large double IPAs or
Like
imperial
rainy day
beers.
beers.
Yeah, not too many rainy day beers, exactly. Everything we brew here is kind of approachable, and that's what my philosophy has always been. I don't really enjoy drinking big beers, so I try to brew stuff that I like to drink, and I hope that trickles down to our customers and people who are our fans and enjoy our beer.
What's next on the list there? Our beer valet is busy back there.
Beer valet, I like the sound of that.
I do too. It's very
Actually, not a bad beer name, actually.
Take my keys and deliver some beers.
Grab a pizza while you're at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this beer though.
Yeah, beer valet. That's great.
But
That'll be our delivery driver.
I've lived in San Diego all my life, so I did spend some time up in the Big Bear area, just to see what it's like when the seasons change and when it snows and how to shovel snow. That's brought me back to San Diego very quick. But I had a lot of people from the East Coast say, "Oh, when it's cold outside, when it's freezing outside, a porter tastes great." I said, "Oh, I don't know." So once I was living up there, I went, "Let me check this out." And sure enough, I drank a porter. It was right. It was so good. It just went with the frozen
Yeah.
tundra.
So true.
Kind of
So
warms you
true.
up a little bit.
Yeah, what do they call it? Stout season, right?
Yeah.
Got to drop below 60 though for us.
Yeah.
So right now, we'll do a little bit of Shakespeare. Oh yes, Stone. I knew them well. Now we're getting ahead of ourselves,
Thank you, sir.
You're moving on here.
We'll drink
to-
the Stone right here at the Stone.
All right, to Stone.
You'll know me. Padre y Filii Spiritu Santo.
So moving on here, I think
Yeah.
to Tony Hop. This is Tony Hop's.
Okay, so I heard all about this, and first of all, everybody knows who Tony Hawk is. He was instrumental in not just putting his name on the beer. He picked a lot of the hops to go in there and kind of was involved in there.
He brewed the beer with Aeryk on his birthday.
Yep, it just lined up perfectly. I
Well,
think,
look at that.
I think some people may have set that up intentionally, but I'm not mad at it. When I saw it on the schedule that it was falling on my birthday, I was just very quiet, didn't say anything, didn't want to blow it up.
Not taking that day off, I
Yeah, I
guess.
was like, I'll be here.
This is a blessed beer for sure. And
Yeah.
this is, I've been here before. This is always the one I go to. Boom, boom, boom.
Awesome.
Boom. Yeah. So what do we have here? What kind of, what did Tony pick? What kind of hops did he get?
So we all selected, we chose to make an IPA, being that, again, that we're in San Diego. People in San Diego love their beers dry, hoppy, and for a West Coast IPA, they like them to be a little bit bitter. So for me though, being that it's a Tony Hop beer, this was generally being marketed to skateboarders and the wider, beer community. I wanted to make something that skateboarders could, after a long session at the skate park or at the ramp or whatever, wherever you're skating, they could sit down and drink a beer that wasn't gonna slap them in the face, wasn't gonna wreck their palate, and was still refreshing. So it is an IPA. There's very light bitterness, but it's nothing, again, that's gonna blow your palate to shreds. It's very approachable, very, very smooth, very flavorful, full of aroma. Again, just being that it was for skateboarders, or I wanted to brew something that skateboarders could drink.
And it's really kind of cool because with the, what's the name of his brand?
Birdhouse.
Birdhouse. So that imagery goes well with the death because it's, it looks like the guy there, even though that's a bird skull.
Yeah, we're using some of the old birdhouse nostalgic art that he originally released years back, and then incorporated his bird beak, bird skull logo into ours, and totally brings the two brands together. And the beer is top notch.
And it's an IPA.
Yes.
I hear West Coast IPA all the time. What's the difference between a West Coast and just a normal IPA?
West Coast IPAs, it's going to be more about the ingredients you're using. So you're looking for a particular flavor profile, being citrusy and vibrant. Like an American IPA is going to be more geared towards a little bit of like the malt sweetness and some more like pine. So we went with the West Coast, being that it's more citrusy, more flavorful, and you can obviously present it in a way that people want to drink. And again, we're in San Diego, and in San Diego we kind of created West Coast IPA, so that's where we're always going to fall.
I feel like I always hear the descriptors grapefruit or resinous pine, with the West Coast style. And
dried apricot. We can add dried apricot to that.
Yeah, not mad at that. This is actually one of my favorite designs that Jared has came out with. I just love the use of the skull in the shield because it stands out from kind of the rest of the brand. And I have this T-shirt like 10 times over. So, it's one of my faves.
So I can smell once again a little bit of the hops, but it's not overpowering.
Yeah. So on this one, we used pretty similar hops across the board. So it's Simcoe, Amarillo in the kettle, and then it has a massive dry hop of Cryo Citra and Cryo Centennial, which is gonna give it that huge like mandarin orange aroma that's kind of popping off the glass.
What I'm noticing is everything marries in this beer, blends together very well.
Yes.
You don't really, it's like a one unit. So how did that process come around?
It took a while. I had a few different recipes on the table when I was developing it, and some of them were a little, I think, too aggressive, and I felt somewhere basically in the middle that I knew was gonna be a safe zone, that wasn't gonna be too bitter, wasn't gonna be like too far to like these wild flavors. It's just all kind of consistent, and what I feel like people are looking for when they read IPA. But again, being like I said earlier, that everything here is pretty approachable. Mm-hmm. I didn't want anything too big or too flavorful. I didn't want it to blow your palate to shreds. So it's very smooth, very balanced, I think is the word we're looking for. Mm-hmm. And just through trial and error and brewing the beer for, gosh, what is it, almost 3 years now, I think?
Yeah.
We've just got it to a point where we're all very happy with it. And
so each time you brew the beer, you can adjust it, and then after 3 years,
I'll never go like too crazy on an adjustment. If I change something, it's usually one thing at a time, and I'll see if it works. Because being that we do have a pretty loyal following of this beer, I never want to like have inconsistencies from batch to batch, so it still needs to remain consistent. So if I'm gonna make a change, it's something small. I'll make my notes, make my tinkers, and then move from there.
Now see, as an artist, when you're designing something, if you kind of screw it up, you just Command Z and you can undo what you did. You can't do that with beer. So you gotta, it's very...
There's no undo button.
That's right.
I wish sometimes.
Once it's in the kettle, there's no...
That's nature, and that's what makes, such a genius here. An artist yourself, because you're dealing
Stick with that genius word. Let's go.
Genius. Definitely, and I forgot to ask, what was your background? How did you get into brewing?
Oh gosh, I got into brewing beer through sales, but but prior to that, no. I've been a big beer fan. I've lived in North County, San Diego now. Now I live in San Diego proper, but prior to that, I lived in North County for about 13 years. So fell in love with beer when I was going to San Marcos for college, and actually it was Stone Ruination. So hearing that they sold a little, it affects me a little bit. It's disappointing.
I just had that last night too.
One of my faves.
They got that. I was just like, hey, look, they got all the IPAs in the 12-pack now. So I had the Ruination, and I was drinking it with a neighbor. And I said, you got to watch out. It's pretty strong. It's 10 clicks. He's like, what? Give me one of those. He was amazed because he was drinking Heineken.
That's a big difference. Oh my gosh.
Big difference. Yeah. So I was just drinking that last night, and then you come in here and find out that they got sold. So.
Stone Ruination is kind of what got me into beer. And then once I finished college, my brother and his wife bought me a little Mr. Beer kit, which is like possibly the worst homebrew setup you could ever have. And that kind of just sparked like an interest for me. And I've been going to breweries in North County for that, a decade at that point. So just wanted to learn more and see if I could do it. So I bought like a proper setup, and then one thing led to another. I was working for a hardware company at the time and was able to build this ridiculous little homebrew rig. And then at the time, they were also building out Black Plague, and my office was like a mile from here. So I would stop by every day on my way back at the end of my route and see if anyone was there, see if the lights are on, and then one day all the bay doors were open. So I was like, well, I'm gonna go in, just try and do a normal sales call. And after, you know, a few months of that, I finally had the gall to be like, hey, by the way, I homebrew. So if you guys are ever looking for like employment, I'm your guy kind of thing. And at that point I had a pretty good relationship with the guys, and they brought me in to start cleaning kegs. And within a few months I was on the brew deck, writing all the recipes, brewing all the beer.
So this is your first job?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at that.
First professional job. I like to tell people kind of right place, right time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I can tell you that that's not I hear that story a lot.
Right.
Some guy came in doing this, that, whatever, was at the right place at the right time. Home brewer, you know, you have to know. But, oh, he was washing dishes at Pizza Port or whatever it is. Some guy quits. And next thing you know, maybe you got in there as a cellarman, and then head brewer goes, and if you know how to do it, you're sitting pretty.
Right, yeah, and I mean, you know, when I say homebrew, I was pretty serious about it. I wasn't entering competitions or anything, but I'm brewing 3 times a week. I'd have, 3-4 beers on tap at all times. Like, wasn't really drinking, I wasn't buying beer anymore, I would say. I was just drinking my own beer, having friends come over, clear out my kegs so that I can keep brewing. Got to a point where I was like sending out messages to friends, like, does anyone want a batch of beer? Because I'm just trying to brew more. I just want to brew. I was in love with it. And 5 years in the garage, led me here. So very proud. Now, gosh, almost crazy to say, but I'm going on like 10 years of brewing, 5 years professional. So it's been a wild ride, and it's all, obviously thanks to Jared and Jordan for taking the shot and taking the chance. So
thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
So yeah, Black Plague, you got to come down here. First of all, Oceanside is definitely the place to be. Black Plague is definitely, you're gonna love it. I mean, Paul's gonna take some shots around later on of all the decor. We got coffins, we got skeletons, we've got all sorts of imagery. It's just awesome. But not only that, you've got live music, you've got food, you've got all the great beer. You can walk out of here with some cool t-shirts and hats and everything. Everything's right here, Black Plague. So come on down, right by the train tracks, that coaster or the Sprinter.
The Sprinter, yeah.
It can take you all the way to the beach, take you all the way to Escondido, right?
That's right, yeah.
So right on the tracks, it's a great place to be. One of my favorite breweries, and thank you guys so much for being on
Thank you.
SD
Appreciate
Craft
it.
Masters.
It was awesome.
Another great episode. We'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.
The light it blazes in your dress tonight. My heart it circles like a satellite. The chill is in the air, the skies open up. A change it feels like it is possible. Tonight's alive for us. You smile at me and tell your friends to go. The water shines up as we stand alone. You interrupt me as I stumble through some awkward line. You kiss me soft and say I'm taking you out tomorrow night. You put your head in mine.